do. Austin, a lot of people from the US, Orlando, Pacific Northwest. Oh, Canada. There's Canada. Still North America, though. I don't know if I'm going to beat you, Jay. I don't know if that's going to happen here. I would love, though, if somebody is in Antarctica, maybe even if you're not, just make it up, right? Because then I can brag on that. Wales, there we go. Sweet. Well, welcome everybody. I'm super excited that you're here. Now, if this is your first Coaches Spotlight, let me explain to you how this works. We actually listened to the community. And what the community said was, back when Jeff was with the company, they absolutely loved it when he would jump in here once a month and he would take coaching questions. He would unpack certain concepts from the one thing so that people had a greater degree of clarity around the tools or the philosophy. And so that's what this is all about. And we did have several people who submitted questions ahead of time. So I have a list of questions that I'm going to cover. And I wanted to start with today, the 411. And so what I had promised everybody in the video that I shot and shared in the One Thing Community Facebook group yesterday is that I would share my 411. And so you can see how I actually use this. But for today, as I kind of walk through this, if there is something specific about the 411 that you have questions on, or another topic that you want to be coached on, it could have come as from the webinar last week, or maybe it's something completely unrelated to the webinar, but something inside of the One Thing book. Feel free to put it into the chat box. And if you're a really brave soul, maybe we could even have you pop off mute, turn your camera on, and we have a little live coaching session here. And yet I wanted to start with the 411 and how I utilize this tool and utilizing it not just in my own life, but in the way that I encourage or coach people to use it in theirs. And the thing I want to start with is that out of everything that I've used to help tame my anxiety, I don't know about any of you, but I am just naturally kind of an anxious person. And that showed up for me in like seventh or eighth grade. I was just always kind of an anxious kid. And still to this day, deal with anxiety. It's something that is still alive and well with me. And yet the 411 has been one of the greatest tools to help me absolve that anxiety. And the reason why is that when the 411 is done properly and it's executed on, meaning it's a living, breathing document in your world, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of our weeks and out of our days. Now, I was kind of hoping that Jay wouldn't be here today because then he's going to see the 411 as it relates to how I tweak it a little bit. But he's here and we're going to deal with this. Now, if you're not familiar with what the 411 is, it stands for 4 weeks, 1 month, 1 year. And so there's some work ahead of your 411 that you really have to do in order for it to be an effective tool. There's some goal setting that you've really got to get done in order for the 411 to be an effective tool. Now, for those of you who don't know, we do have our goal setting retreat next month, and there's 2 ways that you can attend that if you would like. One in person, we still have in-person tickets available, although that's limited supply. And we also have a live stream option. Somebody from the team will put that into the chat box for you so that you can check that out. But the work that you do ahead of time is to get clear on what it is that you want to accomplish over that year. Now, where the 411 for me, there's a little bit of an adjustment here, is that I don't operate well inside of 4 weeks, 1 month, 1 year. I operate better in 4 weeks, 1 month, 1 quarter. See, I like to break it down by quarter. And it doesn't mean that I don't have annualized goals. It's just easier for me from an execution perspective. Now, here's why. There's this thing that we talk about and that Jay and Gary talk about in the book, and it's called hyperbolic discounting. So who out there in the community, in the group here. You can take yourself off mute. You can put it into the chat box. Who out there, and Jay, you can't go, can tell me what hyperbolic discounting is? What is hyperbolic discounting? We've got a shy bunch, or maybe you haven't read the book. Overestimate what we can get done in the short term. That's close. See, hyperbolic discounting basically means that we take instant gratification over long-term gratification. See, when you think about it, we are far more likely to focus on the things that are going to impact us here and now versus all the way out into the future and out into the future over whatever period of time. This is the essence of the goal setting to the now program or process, because we want to pull that vision, that someday goal, out of the clouds and put it right into our daily decision making. And you want to know where I see this show up the most as a coach, especially to kind of high level or executive level people? Most hyperbolic discounting that I see show up is in wealth building. And the reason why is we're conditioned. We're conditioned as a society, at least in the US, that retirement, or what we call optional employment, doesn't happen until we're 62 years old. And so all of that, that's all out there, right? That's a long ways from today. And yet, what I've learned is helping people, like, how would you engineer a wealth building strategy to set yourself free financially in the next 5 years? See, if we chunk it down inside of the container of 5 years, then we're far more likely to let that plan influence our decisions today. And see, I fall into hyperbolic discounting, and sometimes I get too far out into the 1 year and I don't allow the plan to influence my decisions today. So that's why I do 1 quarter. Now, let me share this with you so that you can see it. This is my 411. And there's a couple of things that I do here that I think are kind of cool that help me with this. Number one, when we walk into the office in the morning, every Monday morning, if you ask anyone on my team, I never take a meeting before 10:30 on a Monday morning. Never. And the reason why is because when I walk in to the office, the first thing that I'm going to do, typically it's around 8:30 on Mondays, I take my girls to school that day, is I'm just going to go look at my 411. And the reason why, it alleviates anxiety. It calms me down. It allows me to answer the question, what really matters this week? And so I love this section right here. This is my 90-day why. I just took a little section of the 411 up at the top and asked myself, what is it that I'm really after over the next 90 days? What is it that I really want to focus on or get better at? And it's to become a world-class expert and master of human programming and performance. Now, I may not be able to do that in 90 days, but that's going to generally push me in a direction as it relates to what I'm studying and what I'm covering in books that I'm reading, programs that I'm listening to. It drives me nuts. And maybe you see this in people that are out there on social media. And I always tell my clients, please, please, please don't let me see you being one of these people. But you see people go out on Facebook and they say, hey, I just finished this great book. What book should I read next? And I'm like, why would you do that? Why doesn't your 411 influence what book you read next? Why are you opening it up to the world and generally learning, right? If you go back to what Gary said, one of the things that we have to make peace with in this world is that we can virtually do anything, but we can't do everything. And so that really sets the tone for what's the content of what I'm going to learn, develop the health and the body that will help allow me to live my best life at the peak, making sure that focus on health is the thing that really is driving my energy in this quarter, right? By the way, when we put people through the 7 circles exercise, health is typically the one that they say, if I focused on this one, it would cause all others to rise. If you mess up your health, you'll have nowhere to live. And lastly, become a mastery level of investor in money. Being really clear about what we're doing with our money, how to multiply it. I think each and every one of us if you live in a society where, money is really important, which is probably every society across the world, we're all looking to do three things as it relates to money. We want to make it, manage it, and multiply it. And yet, what I find time and time again is that people want to jump from making to multiplying. The boring stuff in the middle, the managing of the money, that's the stuff that they really need to focus on and what typically gets missed. So that 90-day why, you can add that to the top of your 411 if you would like. It's just something that helps me as it relates to keeping focused on what matters as far as my growth and development. Now, a couple of other things. I love this right here. We just added this as a formula, number of days until the end of the year. And then as we get into the business, now there's different types of 411s out there. And I think it's ultimately personal preference. You'll see some that break into two chunks, personal or business and personal. I like having three different sections. I like having the business, the wealth, and then the personal. And so then we create goals in each of these categories. And the other thing that I want to share is that when you think about 411, one year, 1 month, 4 weeks, I always think of the top two, the year or the 90-day, and then the month. Those are targets. Your weekly, those should be actions. And I'll share with you what I mean by that in a second. But here we have the things that I'm really focused on as it relates to this quarter. These are the things that I believe from a high level are going to move the needle in our business. Here's what it is in our wealth. Here's what it is in training or personal, right? So you create these categories, but again, this needs to come out of a process of goal setting. And so once you're looking at that quarterly or that annual, you break it into the monthly. So like two things right here, My Free Life Recorded. That's one of our signature programs that we'll offer the coaching program outline. This is a really cool program that we're outlining for the one thing that we're going to be releasing very soon. And so we chunk it down to where it's manageable. And here's the thing that I see time and time again as it relates to people in the world that we live in today. We're trying to do too much. We're trying to do way too much. We have fallen victim right into that idea of we overestimate what we can do in a year and completely underestimate what we can do in a decade. And so when we look at this, I would prefer you to have too little than too much here. And there's some reasoning behind this. If you go back and kind of study, back in the early 80s, late 80s, early 90s, there was a company that just dominated in their space, and that was IBM. And IBM famously had low sales quotas for their salespeople. And the reason why is that they wanted a group of people to walk around feeling constantly like they were already winning. And so when you're looking at your monthly, and I'll never forget this, I want to share how this broke down. I was in a meeting with Gary Keller recently, and this is what he showed me. He said that most people right now, they're looking at their four dominoes or their lead dominoes, the things that they want to ultimately win or succeed at. And they have these four dominoes, and then they're trying to knock them down with their focus, and yet they're pinballing, meaning they're bouncing between all of them all the time and not really making any significant impact or building any significant momentum. And he said, what I'm always trying to get people to do is to look at it like this. How do we line them up so that there's just this through line? And that we don't have this dominoing back or this pinballing, bouncing back and forth. We're lining the dominoes up and going through them. Success is sequential, right? That's what we're ultimately looking for. So let me go back to this. There we go. and go back to my 411, and I'll stop here in a second and just let you guys answer any questions. But we chunk it down. And again, I would rather you have too little than too much, because I can guarantee the group that is here, most of you have way too much here. You're trying to do too much. And if you would focus smaller, you would actually get much bigger. But here's the thing that I've really driven home on the 411 that's a little bit different than others, and something that I think would help each and every one of you. Now, remember what I said, I don't take meetings on Monday mornings before 10:30, because I know that this is the thing that will ultimately alleviate the anxiety I have about building a business, raising children, being a good husband, taking care of my health, being good to my team, all the things, right? This is my one thing each week. But when I chunk down the actions that have to take for us to hit our monthlies, and I build them into the week, this is the critical step that I think a lot of people miss. Number one, these need to be able, what we want is to build a bridge from your weeklies to your calendar. We want your weekly 411 to directly communicate with your calendar. Now, a really great way to tell that you've got too much on your 411 is that you can't fit it in. But here's a step that so many people miss. When you look at these things like prep for the masterclass with Kim that I did last week, I set aside 30 minutes to do that. And so what I ask myself is, how long will it take me to complete that? Or how much time am I willing to give to that project this week? And see if it's in yellow, what that means is not only have I given it the time, the amount of time I'm willing to invest on that, but yellow means that I have taken it from my 411 and put it on my schedule. And so what happens is when we walk in on Monday, and I chunk like, here's week 3, this is this week. See this one right here? I don't have time for that this week. It tells me something. I'm trying to do too much. I couldn't find that 45 minutes. But prepping for this, I had an hour. I did that. And because it's in yellow, what I know is it made it from my 411 to my schedule. And these other things like this, not going to happen this week. I don't have the time for it, but that's okay, because I know that I'm doing what really, really matters over here. Yoga sessions, strength sessions. This is some stuff I'm working on health-wise. But what's really beautiful about this is that when I'm done and 10:30 begins, and this is what I want for each and every one of you, there's no confusion. It's clarity. The week begins with complete clarity. And so where I get a little bit frustrated with people about this, and especially people that are a little bit new to it, one thing I want you to understand, and I picked this up from my good friend Craig Zuber, who's a fellow coach, and he says this all the time, and it's absolutely true. Everything is blood and guts before it's ease and elegance. Everything is blood and guts before it's ease and elegance. When you're new to the 411, when you're new to using this to inform a time-blocked schedule, it's going to be messy. And it's going to require you to think through it. And I think sometimes people get way too caught up in the tactics of it, like coming to me and asking me to like build the 411 for them. It's like, I'm sorry, you're an entrepreneur. There is a certain amount of work that you're going to have to figure out on your own and kind of trial and error it until you get it right. But most of you out there, like when I look at the questions that were submitted for this week's or this month's Coaches Spotlight, most of this stuff would be taken care of if you did the time or took the time to truly goal set, got really clear on what is it that I want to achieve, and then took the time to take those things from an annual perspective and thoughtfully and carefully broke them down into the monthly. And when you're looking at that monthly, right, because it's going to inform the weekly, ask yourself this: am I trying to do too much? Am I lining the dominoes up, or do I have four separate dominoes? Because we got ourselves in a big hurry. And people that are in a hurry are the ones that typically end up creating sloppiness, not messiness. And it's different. So, as far as the 411 is concerned, I know that that's a little bit of a different take, right? And yet, this is the thing that ultimately works for me. And before I jump into uh, questions and things that I have from all of you that submitted them, I'm curious, what are your ahas? What are your questions about that? Maybe there's some coaching you want to receive around your own 411. Just talk to me a little bit. Take yourself off mute, put it in the chat box.
I'll jump in there. I like that. I mean, the principles of goal setting to the now are what are evident in a 411. And I think as long as we're adhering to the principles, the format can be very personalized. So
Yeah.
I love that you're demonstrating another way for you to optimize the principles of the one thing for how you like to operate in the world. Did you start there or did you jump to that over time would be my question for you, Jordan.
It was messy. I didn't start there because it took a little bit of like finally just saying the 1 year doesn't work for me. Hyperbolic discounting gets me. And the 90-day, it does. And then one of the things that, and I said this in the last coaches spotlight, and I would encourage you all to write this down. Rituals of review reveal results. See, what you review, you focus on. And because we're so distracted, and because, there's people that they go to these goal setting retreats and they do all this amazing work. They get clarity, they have plans, and then they go home and the book that they wrote all that in, it goes from their hands to a backpack, then from a backpack to a shelf, and it falls victim to shelf help. And so we put in all this energy, all this time writing these plans only to find that they never went from education to execution. And the one thing that I find that bridges that gap from education to execution is just review. Opening the book up, opening up your 411 every single week, and then allowing that to inform your decisions. It makes it so much simpler and so much less guesswork, and we live in so much less confusion. Has that been your experience, Jay?
I'm sorry, restate the question. I had
Oh,
someone knocking on my doorbell, so that I had to go and let them into my house on the side. So multitasking, ask the
when
question again.
you're using the 411,
Yeah.
does it how much less confusion are you living in?
What I love is the consistency over time because I'm interacting with it I mean, at this point, I've been doing it for 24 years. It's such a habit for me to break down big goals into small ones and then to take a little time each week and look at the pattern. And you're, as my coach, you get to see, like, you'll ask me, Jay, you're behind on your book reading, you're behind on this. And I hope that the way I show up is I'm aware of that and I think I can catch up in this period, but I've reprioritized this over this.
Or or we're just not going to catch up on that and we're going to make peace with it because of what's happening, what your focus is right now,
Yeah.
right? That's a strategic conscious decision, not an unconscious one.
Yes. The awareness gives you permission to say no to more things because you're clear about what you've prioritized.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And when you're clear on what you've prioritized, then you don't live in confusion. And here's what confusion creates that I don't know about you, but I don't like this. It creates chaos. Chaos is a byproduct of confusion. And I'll never forget when I told a client of mine, I said, your ability to live in chaos is admirable. Your willingness to tolerate it is maddening. And she just like, it was like I hit her with a 2x4 when I said that. And so confusion creates chaos. And I don't know very many
Well,
people that love chaos.
if we're just riffing here, and please, if somebody's got a question or wants to be on the hot seat, raise your hand, please. We would love to have you because I can tell you personally, Jordan is a really good coach. You can test it out. Just play stump the coach here. Um, just trying to make a challenge. I mean, you got to three continents, like you're making progress, but we still, we only lapped you so far. So we are competitive. Um, I think that, sorry for that. Um, I think that if the disciplines of the 411 are one of the most liberating things, they give us permission to say no to things because we're clear about what we're saying yes to. And I will tell you, when I look at the thieves of productivity, the inability to say no and the fear of chaos,
Mhm.
which one of those is worse for you, Jordan?
Fear of chaos.
Guilty as well. I
Yep.
tend to be a little bit more introverted.
Yep.
I don't need to have, I want people to like me. I don't need them to like me. So I
Mhm.
don't have to worry as much when I say no.
Right.
But I hate chaos.
Yep.
So I would just add to that question, you could flip it, right? There are people who say yes to things, right? Where they should not be tolerating that. I think those are the two, like however you phrase that about your ability to withstand chaos, but you tolerate it more than you should. I think
Mhm.
that's probably for half the people here. They are on that same spectrum for not saying no. And then there's some of us that are tolerating chaos. I think that's a personality thing. I see
Yeah.
Christy agreeing with me. Do you agree, Christy? Which one are you? Up, you're on mute, Christy.
You're on mute.
I'm sitting here thinking I am the exact opposite. So with my 411, it's all I can do. And I've been disciplined enough to do the 20% to get that done. But my question is I continually have some of the same things falling off. And I heard you say, hey, be okay with that. But then where do you get those back in? Like, how do you keep track of them or how do you get back in? Because chaos starts and I just go all over the place. And I lose that focus once I'm kind of out of that 20%.
So I just want to make sure that I understand, Christy. What you're saying is that you nail your 20%.
Most times.
Most
Not
of the, yeah,
100%.
sure. We're all,
All
yeah.
I can do, but yes. Yeah.
Okay. I respect the humility.
Yeah.
Um, and yet there are certain things that show up on your 411 and you're not able to get to them and maybe they fall off and remain undone. Is that right?
Correct.
So I don't know what kind of business you're in, but I can tell you that typically that is a symptom of needing an additional relationship, that there is a piece of leverage or someone that you may need, a hire that hasn't been made. Or as Jay's wife, Wendy, she spoke at this conference and they recorded it. And I think it was up on YouTube. And this was back when I was a fanboy of Jay before I could actually get to coach him. And she talked about this list that she called the not to do list. And essentially, what it was just an accounting of all the things that she was doing throughout her week that they fit into different categories. Like these are things that I just don't like to do at all. It doesn't bring me joy. These are things that I consistently don't get to. These are things that I would just, love for somebody else to do. And I've used that so many times, Christy, because what happens is that not to do list informs the job description of someone in the business that's going to show up and act as leverage. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a new employee, it could be an existing one.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Because, okay, so I had a similar situation. I had a really good maps coach, only he called it my poop list. He called it pardon me, the shit I hated to do list. He said, just start writing all that down. Start writing all that down. And it was interesting because when I took the step to add my virtual, that almost became her job description, right? Because for me and how I like to work, those were all those things. I
Yep.
guess what I hear you saying is that I'm now at the point to like relook at my virtual or relook at how I'm doing that because I'm still having things falling off, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. So when you look at the things that are falling off, I personally love questions that follow the structure. How might I so
Mm,
that I can? Okay, so follow along. How might I get these things to my virtual so that I can
mm,
really nail my 20%? Or maybe it doesn't have anything to do with work. Christy,
right.
maybe it's so that I can go off and enjoy a massage in the middle of the week or recharge my batteries. It doesn't have to be just reallocated back into the company.
Okay.
So that structure of how might I so that I can is typically where those leverage points are going to fit. And then what I find, especially for the right operations people, they're dying to help you. They want to help you. They find
Mm,
real purpose and meaning in helping us,
mhm.
right?
Yes.
It's just that the other thing about that, Christy, and this is why I give Wendy credit every time about the not to-do list. Your brain has these three capacities where it generalizes, deletes, and distorts. So throughout your week, right, and especially in the world of entrepreneurialism, there's so much happening all the time, right? We get emails and texts and fires and this meeting and that person needs this thing. And so at the end of the week, your brain is just filtering through all that and it's generalizing, it's deleting and distorting. And so one of the things that I have struggled with as a coach over the years until Wendy, I heard her say that was, where is it that you're under leveraged? What is it that you're not leveraging and should be? And I think in the moment they're doing their best to recall those things. I think they're trying to figure it out, but they've generalized it and distorted it or deleted it. And so the not to do list is a way to account for those things. And
Mhm,
so all of you that are listening, that's something that you should be doing at least once a month, like going throughout your week and writing those things down. Because what I've seen play out so many times is that by Friday, they've got a pretty good list. And
mhm,
then on the coaching call, like if we had a coaching call on Tuesday, I would say, okay, great. Let's take those things and let's talk about how are you going to communicate that to the people who could do it for you.
mhm.
And it
Mm,
was so easy because they had the accounting. They remembered what needed to be done. Are you with me?
yes.
So that
Yeah.
not to-do list is huge. And it seems to me like you could be missing a relationship or your current leverage could be doing a little bit more for you.
Correct. Thank
Hey,
you.
Jordan, just
Go ahead.
it's Kim. So one thing I
Okay.
just wanted to add there, right, is when we're hitting a ceiling of achievement, things are falling off the list. What I find is in terms of leverage, it can mean more than just a person. And so oftentimes if I'm coaching somebody and working with somebody, it might be, hey, could a system or a tool solve this problem before I need to go pay more money out to make a hire? If the revenue in the business doesn't, account for making a hire right now. So it's looking at also the processes and the systems and the tools that you could be using that you're maybe not. So I just like to add that as like that's an additional option for leverage besides more people.
I agree with that. And one of the other things that Wendy really taught me, and you can tell I'm a fan, is and I think that this is mostly true with women. And I coach powerful women, and I was raised by powerful women. And what she said is that they typically under leverage in their personal lives
Mm,
and that they're not often taught. And I've run into this a lot, like one person in particular running this really successful company. She's doing a great job, and yet she's going home at night and cooking dinner and she has laundry. Now her husband's not just some deadbeat, right? He's working too. And by the end of the day, she's just exhausted. And so what we did is we just looked at how much would it cost to hire a house manager?
mhm.
And it was $60,000. And she hired that person, completely changed her life. And the hardest part wasn't even the money. It was getting over her programming of what a good mom looks like. And it was allowing herself to let go of those things. And when she did, guess what? she became much more present with her family. And so I don't know who needs to hear this, but when if we're having the leverage conversation, and again, Wendy's advice, look at your personal life first. And Gary said something early on in my career that really stuck with me. No job is too small to be subcontracted, right? So great questions. Thank you for that, Christy. I wanted to go back up. Christy, I'm not sure. I think it's Rainey asked a question earlier that I wanted to circle back to. She said, curious, the time blocks were daily times. The ones that were in my weekly, yeah, those are like, that's the chunk of time that I'm going to take from the 411 and then inject it into my calendar. And I hope that that answers your question, but yes, that's the idea. And see, I think it's really important to allocate the number of minutes or hours you are going to give a project, whether that's to completion or just moving the needle, because that's what allows you to get it from the 411 to the calendar, because you know how much time to budget. And Kathy said this, I think this is brilliant. Kathy, I'll quote you on this. Every degree of separation of the plan is decreased likelihood of manifestation. What? What? Do you have a mic? Because I hope you dropped it. Whoa. So good. So good. Sue, I would love to hear your best thoughts around a productive 411 meeting. AHA, the color coding for time investment that's actually on my calendar. It's more an estimate of time. So Sue, you may have to take yourself off mute for me to answer that. I've got somebody just raised their hand. And Sue, you're one of our great coaches. I may have to have you come up. Maybe they put their hand down. But did somebody just have a question that they wanted to ask? I saw a hand go up and then go down. No, maybe I imagined that. Sue, are you here with us? Do you want to?
I am.
Okay. So unpack this for me a little bit.
The aha that I had when you were talking about the yellow color coding is realistically estimating the time that a project will take, and then the budget of time that I have for that activity, like you said, to move the needle forward. That was my aha. Instead of trying to figure out, okay, how much time do I need for this specific activity, not really understanding what might happen in the middle of it that will either shorten that time or lengthen that time. So just the thought of that going into that, I think is so valuable, at least for me. And then the other question I had was your thoughts around having a productive 411 meeting. I coach a lot of business owners who do 411 meetings with their people, and I would love to be able to better coach them on more productive 411 meetings. So I'm asking for your thoughts there.
Well, okay, that's a big question, and I'll do my best to answer that. Okay, number one is that the effectiveness of a 411 meeting is ultimately going to be found in the thoughtfulness of the 411 being constructed. And so I had for the longest time, I had this great mentor when I lived in Wichita, Kansas, and he had this saying that always stuck with me. And he said, it doesn't matter if we're talking about your business or your marriage, you can prepare or you can repair. And he said, it's a hell of a lot easier to prepare than it is to repair. He had this big burly, he's like one of those, I loved him. He passed away, but what I loved about him is he looked like this big, rough and tough cowboy. But then you would talk to him, he was like this thoughtful philosopher. He was so cool. And so when you think about the effectiveness of a 411 meeting, right, or a 411 coaching session, that's all, in my opinion, going to be predicated upon how much energy and effort has this person put into the 411. Are we preparing or repairing? Because if that person shows up and the 411 is kind of a mandatory thing that they haven't really been taught what it does, then I don't think that they're going to buy in to the conversation that you're having with them in the coaching conversation. Does that make sense, Sue? And so really making sure that we test the waters, right? Tell me about how did the things that are on your 411 get here? Walk me through the process of how you chose these things. And then what you're really talking about, if you're in the cycle of a 411, is you're living the accountability cycle, right? And one of the things that as leaders we have to understand is that what works for on accountability with me may not work with accountability with Sue. And so we've got to make sure that we're operating off of the same definition of accountability. Accountability to me, by the way, is simply the process we use to keep our own promises. You're here to help me keep my promises. And when I keep my promises, I get to live my purpose. I get to do what I want to do, right? So, Sue, that's the place I would encourage you to start is what's the level of thoughtfulness that's going into this 411? If that business owner is using it with their people, what level of education have you offered them? Do they understand the power of this tool? Do they see it as useful? Or is it just something that you've handed out in a mandatory type of a way and asked them to fill it out? Are you with me? Does that answer your question? Jay, is there anything you'd add to that? Kim, anything you'd add?
I was going to let Kim go first if she wants to. Well, I don't want like to be the last word. Like, oh, he's the co-author. He must be right. You guys are serious practitioners and do thousands and thousands of hours of this as well. I think that there's the preparation the person puts into it. I love that. How much do they invest in this? Because I deal with a lot of employees. Some of them are just going through the motions. It's basically a to-do list. It's got nothing to do with their real 20%.
Mhm.
And that's usually evident within just a few weeks.
Yep.
I also think that there's the preparation for you, the accountability partner. Are you tracking your notes from last week? Like if you're just showing up and living in the moment, you'd better be as skilled as you are. I think that I feel that you have shown up with some measure of preparation from your side as well, and a plan for the call, though you're willing to be flexible. And so I want to show up and aspire to do that for my people. I look at what we talked about last week. I try to pull the thread. How did that go last week? How do you feel about it? Just the standard questions before we start talking about the future.
Mhm.
So for me, it's about having a system that allows you to remember from week to week what the conversation is. And like a good novel, is there a thread you're pulling through it? Because usually you see things in trends, right? Do they tend to get distracted? Are they afraid of chaos? Or are they afraid of saying no? Like, where are their blind spots that I can help them on? So that would be my only add. I thought I love the language and I love your unique take on it.
Yeah. And by the way, whether it's an accountability or a 411 meeting, or a coaching session, like when I train coaches, one of the things that I share with them, and this is just my basic outline for a coaching conversation, and it's not the one and only, it's just the one that serves me. It's really easy. EAT. Spell it vertically with 2 T's. EATT. Energy, accountability, topic, take action. So you enter into a 411 or a coaching conversation, where's their energy, right? One of my great mentors, who was like, to me, one of the godfathers of real estate coaching, was a guy named Tony DeCello. And he said, you walk into every call, every conversation, ready to listen. And you listen from the first word. Where's their energy? Then the accountability is, here are the things we talked about last week. Where are we? Just update me. Now, accountability is not meant to be a hammer that we just hit people with. I believe, as coaches, it's our job to be infinitely curious about the way our people make decisions, not infinitely judgmental. And I want to understand, if you had an intention to do something and you didn't do it, can you walk me through the moment that you made the decision not to do it? Where were you? Who were you with? What were you thinking? What was the story? Because I want always to remain on the side of them in the partnership, and we're looking at the problem. I'm not part of the problem. And then when we get into topic, it's like, well, oftentimes the accountability is going to set the tone for the topic. And then what are the actions that we're going to take, right? What are the things that you're going to agree to from this call until the next one? And sometimes you won't have action items. That's okay. It's okay to have just a brain session where you're downloading, or maybe you just need somebody to listen to you. But I think that's just worth noting.
Hey,
So
Jordan,
go ahead, Kim.
just one thing there, and sorry for not jumping in, Jay. I wanted to be the last word, actually. Just kidding. Um, so I think in terms of a powerful 4-in-1 session, it's really asking the question is, are they using this as a tool or is it a task list? And the more that they're using it as a tool, the frequency at which they're looking at it will impact the, the level of that 4-in-1 session. So that's all I wanted to add there.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Kim. I'm going to come to, I think it was Lisa or Lindsay who had her hand up. Evan, I wanted to answer your question. How do you handle wanting to do too much in one time frame? In other words, not being able to just select one thing. Well, the thing is that I am a proponent as it relates to coaching people of, does this work or not? I don't believe in right and wrong. Like there's a right way and a wrong way, right? We're not talking about morality, by the way, but is your current approach getting you closer to what you want? Yes or no? Now, if it's not, okay, well, one thing that I heard Gary say, it might have been last year, Jay can correct me here if I'm wrong, but one thing he said, and God, it hit me so hard. He said, I have just made peace with the fact that I've made peace with how long it takes things to get done. And you, as an entrepreneur or somebody who's going to build something awesome, you've got to have patience in the macro and hustle in the micro. And so if I'm coaching you on that, Evan, I'm just going to ask you, is that working? Is that effective? And if you're a person who wants to get where you want to go, and that's not working, can we sit here in a partnership and agree to do things that actually do work, that do move the needle towards what you want? And ultimately, what I'm going to ask you is, do you want to be a pinball or a golf ball? See, pinballs are busy, right? They get dropped into the little machine, they get smacked around. This is how a lot of us live our lives today, right? We don't go anywhere. We stay in the same machine every day. We get smacked around a lot. And then we drop down and wait again tomorrow for the little bar to pull back up and smack us into the world. But a golf ball is going to travel. It's going to go, ideally, if it's not me, it's going to go down the fairway, right? And so do you want to be a golf ball or do you want to be a pinball? Because you have finite amount of time on this earth. If you are intending to do things that are great, then we've got to use that time wisely. So I'm going to appeal to your logic on that. So I hope that makes sense. So Lindsay, and you might have been the one that had your hand up. I have struggled to define the exact source of my procrastination. It's the hyperbolic discounting and not setting those longer term goals. So I don't know that I have enough here to help you with that. I don't know if it's even a question. If you're here and
Yeah.
looking for me to coach you on that, I'm glad. Oh, there you are.
Yep.
Hi.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I'm very new to the one thing. I've only came across podcasts in the last couple of weeks, and I bought the book, and I'm very in the early stages of that. But I've been tinkering around the edges, and because I'm in a big time crunch at the moment. I've done a lot of self-development based on procrastination, which is as a scientist, I don't know, we like to be perfect. So it's very easy to procrastinate on things and wonder where you're going with it. But it's just one of those aha moments that I've had. And I wonder how many people get lost in their goal setting because they want it to be perfect. And that's the point of pain for their brain and the reason why they procrastinate. And I think that's the 4-1-1 is, I think now I have a better understanding on how to use it effectively. that's going to help move that along a little bit because I now know how to guide myself past that point of pain. And I think that's probably a really good thing for people I've been taught goal setting, but not in this manner. As a scientist, I'm a systems person, so I understand that sequential ordering of things. It makes perfect sense to me. But writing out these big goals with no clear path to it, I think that's where this whole process for most people tends to fall down, is that
I
they don't
agree.
have that roadmap. Yeah.
I agree.
So
And
thank you.
absolutely. And thank Jay, because what the goal setting to the now process did is it taught us how to pull that out of the clouds and put it into the dirt, right? And I think that that's what you're really sharing. And I have a personal belief that people who dream but don't do are some of the most tortured souls on the planet. They're way more tortured than the people who don't dream, right? And
Definitely.
so that willingness to sit in it and work yourself through it to where it is like, okay, now I have a plan to get from A to B. And one of the things that Jay said, I think it was on an interview or a podcast a while back, is the world doesn't need a different way to set goals. We need a different way to have a relationship with them. And my big aha, Lindsay, as it relates to relationships, is that if I ask you, how are your relationships, you're probably going to talk about people. But see, we relate to ideas and concepts in the same way we relate to people. And with our goals, oftentimes, like think of it like, when you fill out like a social media profile and it asks you your relationship status and it says, I'm single, long distance, it's complicated, right? So we all are going to select that relationship status, like I'm married, right? And yet we all have a relationship status to our goals. And for a lot of us, it's long distance, it's complicated. And oftentimes that's because we haven't done the work to pull it from our hopes and dreams down into an executable plan.
I think that's true. And I also think that it's easier to set a goal when someone's giving you a choice rather than you finding it yourself.
Yeah, that's true. It's easier in a sense that it's easier as it relates to getting to clarity, but it's harder in the sense that if that goal doesn't relate to your calling, that's going to create some real dysfunction within you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easy to get lost.
Yeah. Right. Totally different conversation. So thank you for that. Thank you, Lindsay. That's great. All right, we've got roughly 6 minutes. I'm just scrolling through some of the questions here. Josh, how do you pull the thread as a coach, keeping the trends without notes that are good stuff and not fluff? I'm not sure if I know what you mean by that. If you're here, can you take yourself off mute and ask me that question? How do you pull
Hey,
the...
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan. Greatly appreciate you. I guess in your coaching calls, you mentioned pulling on the thread with the accountability and getting to the trends that you see with your coaching clients. I found I've started taking notes and then it gets to just be overwhelming. And then it's not helpful notes and it's just a mess of fluff. So how do I guess, see better the trends and not all the extra stuff?
I wonder if what you're really asking is, how do I set the stage for healthy accountability in my coaching conversations? Is that what you're really asking?
Yeah, I guess that would be the outcome I would desire in having better notes. Yeah.
Okay, that's clock management. Okay, and here's what I mean. Let's say you and I, for example, have a 45-minute call. Right now, it's 2:55 Central, right? Let's say our call is going to begin at 3. About 40 minutes into that call, a little timer in my mind. I don't have a physical timer anywhere, and I don't do this perfectly, by the way, but there's a little timer in my mind that's going to go off and realize I've got 5 minutes left with you in this session. And so the first question I'm going to ask is, and it's the The essence of the question is the same, although it's not the same question every time. But like today, I asked somebody, hey, we've got 5 minutes left. Based on today's conversation, what have you learned today that's going to make you a better business owner? So they're going to recap that to me, right?
Okay.
Based on what we discussed today, what specifically is it you'd like for me to hold you accountable to between now and next week? Now, anytime that I'm taking notes on a call, and by the way, I don't take notes. Like I have all these like scraps of paper and things everywhere. My calls are recorded. They get uploaded to Otter AI, and I let the AI take the notes, and I have a VA that cleans it up. But I have a little sheet of paper, and down in the left-hand corner, I'm just scribbling on it. I write action items. And so if I'm coaching Kim and she says something like, I need to read that book, I make a note of that in the action items. But I'm not sitting there trying to transcribe everything that she says. But then, and here's the beauty of this, Josh, is especially if you're newer to this, if you want to know how to best prepare for a coaching call, all you do is go back and listen to the last 5 minutes of the previous one. So if I wasn't sitting here with you right now and we had a call in 5 minutes, I don't do this anymore. I have different systems and processes that do this for us. But back in the days when I was still kind of newer to this, I just go back and right before your coaching call, I'm just going to listen to the previous 5 minutes of the last one, because here's what people want. They want like, let's just say that there are 40 coaching sessions or 25 coaching sessions in the year. They want that to feel like one big call. They don't want it to feel like individual conversations. And so you got to put yourself in the mindset of that by just going back 3 to 5 minutes, and boom, mentally you're right back in that conversation. And so then you can open the call up with, hey, Jordan, how are you? I'm good, great. Hey, do you mind if we just dive right in? There were a couple of things that you agreed to last time. I'm just going to review these with you. Are you good with that? Yes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fantastic, actually. It's really helpful.
You're working too hard, and here's the problem with that. When you're working too hard on a coaching call, it's not any different than when you're in a sales conversation. You're not listening. And I think a mark of a master coach is when you can start to hear their thoughts. You can hear it before they say it, but you can't get so arrogant to ever believe that you're accurate. So you have to test that. I think what you're trying to say is, am I right? Instead of telling them. Are you with me?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Okay, cool. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for the investment. Thank you for playing with me here. We will be back next month with our Coaches Spotlight. Make sure, if you haven't already, to sign up for the goal setting retreat. This is the last one as we know it. And so join us either live in Austin, Texas, or on the live stream. We would love to have you. And thank you for the opportunity to pour into all of you. I trust that it